General Hospital spoilers reveal that Willow is being pushed to the brink of a deep mental breakdown, not because of a distant enemy threatening her, but because the two people she once trusted most, Nina and Drew, have each betrayed her with cold, calculated actions. At a time when she should have been surrounded by trust and healing after so much pain and illness, Willow finds herself drowning in a dark emotional spiral. Her feelings begin to unravel. Every familiar anchor grows blurry and unfamiliar. What she's experiencing isn't just disappointment, it's a profound sense of being manipulated, used, and cast as a pawn in a game she never agreed to play. The first shock came from Nina, the very person Willow had struggled so hard to forgive, who once stood by her hospital bed with tears, begging to be called Mom. Willow had hoped that, despite their painful history, sincerity could mend their broken bond. But the truth crushed the last remnants of her trust. In her desperation and selfishness, Nina had conspired with Portia to orchestrate a lowly scheme, drugging Drew, and using Jacinda as bait to create a fake, emotional trap. Their goal was to drive a wedge between Willow and Drew, but the cost wasn't just lost trust. It unleashed a fury within Willow that no one had seen before. Before she could even recover from that blow, the second betrayal came, from the one person she thought was safest, Drew. He had stood by her during Michael's absence, held her hand through countless hospital visits, and promised never to hurt her like others had. But then Willow discovered that Drew had been hiding a critical truth. He had bribed a clinic employee in Germany to conceal Michael's past attempts to find her during her treatment, quietly rewriting history to suit his interests. Drew manipulated Willow's emotions to keep her close, maintaining a relationship built on deception. 2 betrayals, from her biological mother and from the man who swore he wouldn't repeat Michael's mistakes, cut deep into Willow's psyche. More than pain, she began to feel lost, doubting everything and everyone, even herself. She wondered if all her trust, all her efforts to preserve what mattered, had been worth it. Was it fair that she was always the one to forgive, the one to sacrifice, while others freely exploited her faith to serve their own agendas? It was in that moment that Willow began to enter a state of emotional madness, not in a negative sense, but in the form of a powerful explosion of emotions. Someone who had always lived for others now questioned the boundaries of kindness. She started retracing every moment, Nina's lies, Drew's silence, and the stories that had been twisted to control her. She no longer believed in tears, apologies, or repeated promises. And so, an inevitable shift began, a change in how she acts, chooses, and exists in a world full of masked faces. Willow started making bold decisions. She no longer wished to maintain her relationship with Nina, not just because the wound was too deep, but because she realized that unless she cut ties completely, she would always be trapped in a toxic cycle of manipulation. And with Drew, his silent betrayal was even more dangerous than an outright lie. He hadn't used force or coercion, he used her trust to hold her back. That was something she could never forgive, and it became the reason she considered leaving them both at once. A new decision was taking form, strong, definitive, and unwavering. Willow was no longer a fragile woman needing rescue. She had endured too much loss, and now she wanted to reclaim autonomy over her life. She wasn't afraid of pain anymore, she was familiar with it. But she would no longer be a victim in someone else's game. Willow now stood at the threshold of a fierce awakening, and once she stepped through, she would never look back. The emotional storm Nina and Drew unleashed in her may end up costing them everything. Because once Willow speaks her final word, once she decides to let go and not forgive, there will be no second chances. And this time, they'll be the ones facing a new version of Willow, sharper, colder, and no longer willing to believe in apologies. One of the most shocking emotional upheavals quietly reshaping Port Charles is the dramatic turn in Willow and Nina's relationship, a bond that had always been fragile, precarious, and riddled with unresolved tensions. After everything that has happened, Willow has reached a pivotal turning point, a decision that leaves no room for sympathy or redemption. She has not only cut off her relationship with Nina completely, but also taken concrete action, revoking all guardianship and decision-making rights from Drew regarding her personal life, her children, and any legal matters involving her family. This event isn't just a direct blow to Nina, who still held hope of one day being accepted by Willow, it's also a devastating shock to Drew, the man once seen as her most reliable ally. But for Willow, trust is no longer something to be handed out carelessly. After discovering that both Nina and Drew had exploited her, while she was still recovering, both physically and emotionally, to manipulate her choices and feelings, she realized that if she didn't reclaim control over her own life, she would forever be trapped beneath false promises and schemes disguised as love. Willow's plan to file paperwork removing Drew's guardianship rights is the first move proving that she no longer wants anyone to determine her future. Drew made a grave mistake, turning affection into a means of control, distorting reality by bribing a healthcare worker to create a narrative that made Michael look like the one who walked away. That's no longer love, it's manipulation. And Willow, having hit emotional rock bottom, will never allow anyone to cross that line again. At the same time, Nina, whom Willow tried harder than anyone else to forgive, has now been officially cut off. No more back and forth, no more emotional talks or soft-hearted weakness. Willow has reached her final limit. And the 3 cold, resolute words she uttered cut the last thread of connection: I don't need. 3 simple words, yet they carry the weight of total rejection, of kinship, of remorse. And of the mother title Nina clung to like an emotional privilege. For Willow, Nina drugging Drew and setting up a betrayal trap left an unhealable wound. Not because she wasn't used to pain, but because she had hoped Nina would change. But Nina didn't, and that, to Willow, meant it was over. An intense emotional shift is underway, not just within Willow, but in the entire balance of power among those closest to her. Drew hasn't just lost guardianship, he's lost the place of confidant he thought he held. Nina hasn't just lost a daughter, she's lost her one chance to prove she could be forgiven. Both have placed themselves among those Willow no longer makes room for in her life. And so, the emotional earthquake called Willow's transformation has officially begun. No longer the gentle girl who stepped back for others, Willow will now live for herself, for her child, and for the peace she has lost too many times because of misplaced trust. Those 3 words, I don't need, are more than a statement. They are the beginning of a new chapter, where she no longer lives in the shadow of the past, but walks forward, strong, clear-eyed, and without looking back. Nina has sown chaos with her own hands, and now, she can no longer control the storm she created. What began as a series of calculated manipulations, intended to sway Willow's emotions and sever her bond with Drew, has turned back on Nina with brutal consequences. What she did, drugging Drew and collaborating with Portia and Jacinda to stage a deceitful night, seemed like the perfect move to shake Willow's trust. But now, it's the very reason Nina finds herself trapped in an inescapable disaster. Willow is no longer the fragile girl who tolerated Nina's presence in her life just because of blood ties. Instead, she's transforming her pain into action, a cold, deliberate form of retaliation. There are no more tears, no more bitter words. Now, Willow wants Nina to feel a pain that matches what she endured, not through outbursts, but through carefully laid steps, each backed by evidence, each lie unraveled. Every act Nina tried to conceal, every lie she thought was forgotten, is now being exposed under the harshest light, starting in Germany. The evidence in Baden-Baden, where Drew received treatment and where Nina used her money and influence to alter medical records, is now becoming a weapon in Willow's hands. She doesn't need to shout or beg for anyone to believe her. What's surfacing? Wire transfer receipts, internal audio recordings, altered medical reports, is redrawing the entire picture of how Nina and Drew together distorted the truth. The striking part is this: Drew, once seen as a victim in Nina's scheme, is now viewed by Willow as a co-conspirator. She no longer distinguishes between who is pitiable and who is blameworthy. In her eyes, both played a role, either through intent or silence, in causing her an unforgivable pain. The madness now doesn't stem from Nina's actions, but from their consequences. Willow no longer suppresses her pain through endurance. She lets it guide her, not towards self-destruction, but toward retribution. Her goal, to make Nina lose everything, her reputation, her legal role in the lives of her grandchildren, and, most painfully, the chance to redeem herself that she once begged for. To Willow, this is no longer a mother-daughter conflict. It's a battle between truth and lies, and for the first time, she holds the power to expose it. Nina, once confident in her ability to manipulate others' emotions, is now up against a fully awakened Willow. Phone calls from legal firms, silence from former allies, scrutinizing stares from the press, all point to the real cost of her manipulations. She thought she could reshape reality, distort memory, and mold belief. But now, the cold, unassailable truth coming out of Germany is showing otherwise. Nina is no longer writing the script. She's being rewritten into the tragedy she authored. As for Drew, though once quiet in his supposed role as victim, he can no longer maintain a safe distance. His concealment of truth, his silent complicity, and his manipulation of Willow's perspective to alienate her from Michael now place him in the same category as Nina. Willow no longer cries for either of them. She watches. She analyzes. And she acts. This is a version of Willow no one has seen before, cold, resolute, and with one goal in her eyes, to make both Nina and Drew pay for every wound they inflicted. There's no longer room for redemption through apologies or tears. A new era is beginning, where buried trauma is no longer suppressed, but turned into action. And in this journey, Willow doesn't need pity or agreement. She needs the truth. And this time, that truth, buried in forgotten files in Germany, will be what strips Nina and Drew of every ounce of emotional control they once held. Willow is quietly becoming a force to be reckoned with in Port Charles. She's no longer the gentle woman living in the shadow of powerful men, Michael, Drew, or even Sonny. Now, after a series of cruel betrayals and toxic silences, Willow has learned that kindness alone does not protect her from harm. And from that pain, a new Willow is emerging, sharp, resilient, and ready to act. The plan she's silently putting in motion is no longer about revenge or emotional retaliation. It's a strategic campaign, aimed at a target no one would expect, Michael Corinthos. To the public and his friends, Michael is the ideal man, successful businessman, devoted father, and a more principled heir than his father ever was. He's trying to distance himself from Sonny's shadow by building a clean empire with new financial alliances, charitable foundations, and discreet political connections. But Willow, who once shared every breath with Michael, knows the truth beneath the facade, that he, too, is a manipulator, hungry for power like anyone in the Corinthos bloodline. She knows that if Michael succeeds in creating a new legacy, it will be built on distorted truths and her own sacrifices. After watching him remain absent during her darkest moments in the hospital, then return as if nothing happened to reassert control over Wiley and Amelia, Willow sees clearly, he didn't come back out of love, but out of ownership. Every promise, every tearful embrace, were tools to keep her under his influence. But she's no longer the self-sacrificing wife. She's waiting to strike, and when she does, it will be monumental. What no one knows is that Willow has been quietly gathering data, consulting independent lawyers, and carving out her own path in the legal battle Michael is about to wage for custody. While he publicly flirts with the idea of becoming the children's primary guardian, citing their future security through a web of investment trusts he controls, Willow holds the evidence that he's been funneling untraceable funds from charitable foundations to evade taxes and hide financial ties to dangerous figures once linked to Sonny's criminal network. Even more damning are secrets Michael tried to bury, such as his covert collaboration with Valentine and Brennan, which now threaten to turn against him. Willow has found a recorded conversation from Drew, a private file he once kept to protect himself during a financial conflict with Michael, back when they launched the Port Charles redevelopment project. In that recording, Michael admitted to using intermediary transfer tactics to fund a lobbying campaign in the state legislature, a serious violation of transparency regulations. Willow doesn't intend to drop everything at once. She wants to corner Michael into making a choice, maintain his public image as the perfect father, or withdraw from her and the children's legal lives with dignity. But Michael's growing ambition pushes him further. He's hired media consultants and begun covert lobbying to gain more legal control over Amelia, something Willow will never allow. That was the spark that flipped her plan from defensive to full-scale offensive. Willow doesn't need threats. Just one press conference, and everything Michael has built will collapse. His clean business empire will face investigations. His charitable organizations will have frozen accounts. And every project linked to his name will be torn apart by the media. But the harshest cost will come from his children, when they see him as a fraud, no longer morally fit to be part of their lives. A disaster is looming over Michael, not because an enemy attacked him, but because he underestimated the woman who once loved him with everything she had. Willow no longer plays by Michael's rules. She's rewritten them. And in her version, the man who thought he could control everything will learn that legacy is not power or money, it's truth. And this time, truth is what will destroy everything Michael tried to protect. Michael is truly entering an ambitious and dangerous phase of his life, a journey shaped by new calculations, where he is no longer the ideal man simply devoted to family, but someone quietly building his own power base, even willing to risk everything to achieve it. His current strategies go beyond restoring his public image after a long withdrawal from the business world. They reflect a deeper ambition to construct a new legacy, one that surpasses Sonny's influence, built through reason, strategy, and carefully calculated legal maneuverings. However, what Michael failed to anticipate is that Willow, once his most steadfast supporter, is now the very person triggering a series of serious disruptions threatening the entire structure he has built. Her cold, decisive actions, from stripping Drew of guardianship, severing ties with Nina, to being fully prepared to confront Michael over the rights to their children, are pushing him into a completely reactive position. To him, these are no longer emotional, impulsive rebellions, but sharp, calculated moves from a woman who no longer wants to be controlled. Willow doesn't need to shout or confront him directly. She simply withdraws her trust, the very thing Michael has always considered his most powerful and visible weapon. And that alone has caused his entire plan to waver. From his efforts to build influence in financial foundations, community organizations, to his personal PR campaign via the media and local political ties, Michael is now finding himself surrounded by signs of collapse. Partners grow hesitant, contracts are delayed, and the carefully cultivated image of the model father now faces mounting scrutiny. Michael is being pushed to the edge as he realizes that Willow, the woman he once thought would never dare to resist, is now the only one capable of unmasking everything he has tried to protect. Not just because she knows every weakness, every hidden corner of his under-the-table dealings, but because she's the only one who truly makes him afraid, not by yelling, but by her silence. And that silence is Michael's greatest fear right now. Willow doesn't need to reveal everything at once. She lets Michael's relationships fracture naturally. She lets each piece of his power structure sink into doubt and confusion. And she does it by not being there, no defense, no appearance, no statement. Her absence from public events, her refusal of private meetings, her silence when the media calls her name, all create a power vacuum that shakes Michael's image from the inside. Michael now lives haunted by Willow's transformation. He once believed she would never betray him. But now he sees he misjudged her, not because she was weak, but because she has become stronger than he ever imagined. She doesn't seek revenge. She simply steps out of his sphere of influence, and for a man obsessed with control, that's more terrifying than failure itself. An explosion is looming, not the kind born of scandal, but a quiet, thorough collapse of a power structure built on the assumption that everyone will eventually comply. Willow is no longer complying. She no longer believes. And she is no longer willing to stay silent. That alone has forced Michael to confront something he was never prepared for, a woman who no longer loves him, no longer fears him, and no longer wants to stay. Michael's obsession is no longer fueled by external threats, not Sonny, not Brennan, not Nina. It now comes from the very person he once believed harmless, Willow. And as that truth becomes clearer with each passing day, Michael knows that collapse is no longer a theory. It's happening. From within. One step at a time.